she had a quote, which I love. She said, "I made the changes that I needed to make and focused on me instead of focusing on what he needed to do better." Welcome to the Kickass Couples Podcast. This is the place where we help committed couples who want to level up their marriage experience newfound clarity, hope, and confidence. We're Matthew and Kim, co-hosts and husband and wife.
In 26 years together, we've seen a lot and never thought it could be as good as it is right now. We're here to help you successfully navigate the messy, dirty, and wonderful world of marriage.
We believe all couples deserve and are capable of experiencing an extraordinary and fulfilling marriage. And each week, we're bringing you life lessons from real-life successful couples to help you grow and strengthen your relationship.
We'll get started right after this message.
If you want to learn how to experience the best, most fulfilling year of your marriage, we invite you to order Matthew's new book, Kickass Husband, Winning at Life, Marriage, and Sex. You can get it at Amazon.com or visit Matthew's website, www.matthewphoffman.com. Again, that's Amazon.com or www.matthewphoffman.com. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to the Kickass Couples Podcast. Today's episode brings us this kick-ass husband and wife duo, Trey and Lee Morgan, who took their passion for marriage and deep abiding friendship to create a formidable team as successful marriage coaches. Trey and Lee have been married for over 30 years and together have raised 4 incredible boys. They have been involved in the marriage ministry and marriage coaching for over 20 years. They feel blessed to get to speak to thousands of people each year on how to build godly, healthy marriages and families. Trey and Lee have 2 marriage books. One is the bestseller 10 Ways to a Stronger Marriage and Wisdom for Your Marriage, which you can find and order from Amazon. Trey and Lee work together to build a stronger marriage with their weekend workshops called Stronger Marriage and Stronger Families. In their Stronger Marriage workshops, they focus exclusively on marriage. They deal with contemporary topics on the subject of marriage in a practical way, giving inspiring ideas on how to improve your number one relationship. In their Stronger Families workshop, they cover topics that primarily deal with the family unit. Topics like parenting, how to grow blended families, marriage, and much more. You can find their podcast, the Stronger Marriage Podcast, on places like Apple, Google Podcasts, and Spotify.
In today's recap edition episode, Kim and I will share our key takeaways from our interview with this dynamic couple. We'll break down concepts, relationship qualities, and key pillar points that they've used to build their rock-solid relationship that will stand the test of time.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Kickass Couples Podcast. Today, we are having a recap episode of Trey and Lee Morgan. We are going to talk about some really fun takeaways that we had from our interview with them.
They were a great couple. They are in the full-time ministry of marriage, and they have classes, and they do training, and they speak. They have a podcast. They just do all kinds of great things to help couples level up and prioritize their number one.
It's fun to talk to the experts because I think that they have not only a great understanding of what it takes to have a kick-ass relationship, but they also have some unique things that they do that might be a little bit different from mainstream. And I enjoyed having some of those takeaways from this particular interview.
It was fun. They've been married. They've got a bunch of kids, and they're in the thick of it, just like all the rest of the families. But, you know, Kim, what did you take away? What did you, when they asked, we always start off with what makes them a kick-ass couple. What did you pull from that?
That's always a great question. And I feel like the thing that stood out to me the most was the fact that early on in their marriage, they sought out enrichment for their relationship, meaning they would attend workshops or they read books. They really learned what each other's love languages were. They were doing some intense work in the beginning stages of their relationship to really help, again, enrich their relationship. And a lot of us don't do that.
No.
I feel like that's something that we came to later on in life, realizing the importance of it after we were kind of on a down or downward slope.
Yeah,
exactly.
We came late to the game, and it wasn't until after 20 years of being married. We just celebrated our 28th wedding anniversary a couple of weeks ago, and we are grateful for that. But we didn't realize that we knew individual development, whether it was mental or physical or spiritual, that we had to do that. But it wasn't until after 20 years of marriage that we started really being aware of the necessity to invest in our relationship every day, all the time, intentionally, with a whole toolkit of different resources. And they got that much earlier. And I think that, you look back and you go, man, what if we'd done this sooner, right? Mm-hmm. And I hope that everybody out there, that you are taking intentional steps to invest in and enrich and pour into your relationship. It's your number one human relationship. And if you're not sure what to do, that's really why we started this podcast. And that's why we have Kickass Couples Nation. So we hope that you are intentional in doing things in that area. And, I love one of the things that Lee said, Kim, about what makes them kick ass is really it's the mentality. She said early on that in her early years, she said when there was a conflict or something that she didn't like, she goes, man, I wish he would just fix that. I wish he would change. I wish he wouldn't do that. I wish he would do this. And she said, she had a quote, which I love. She said, I made the changes that I needed to make and focused on me instead of focusing on what he needed to do better. And I think that's kind of a recurring theme, something that we've seen in a lot of couples we've spoken to, is when your focus is on what the other guy or girl, man or woman needs to do, you're missing the boat, because it's more every day. What can I do, right? What do I need to do to show up best for my partner in this relationship? And I think she got that. And I think, and she ascribed it and she said, that's why we're a kick-ass couple, is because we both realize that we've got to work on ourselves to show up best for our partner and not worry about how we can change or mold or modify our spouse.
Right. And I think that goes right back to the very beginning of the relationship, when you're learning about each other and you're discovering each other. I feel like, those are things early into the relationship. If they're red flags then, and you're having things that you think, oh, well, it'll be better later, or it'll be better when, I don't think that those things actually ever get better. I think they just sort of intensify later on in the relationship. And so I think doing a better job of also really making sure you're a good match for each other before you dive into marriage is important, because the reality is you shouldn't want to fix or change that person, because you fall in love with the person that you're, getting to know, the person that's revealing themselves to you. I
think the number one piece of advice I could give to anybody that's in a relationship and thinking about marriage or coming back into another relationship is, if you're not completely happy and satisfied with them the way they are right at that point, in thinking it'll get different, it'll get better when you change them, when we're married, then we will, or when we're committed, then we will. It doesn't mean that the relationship can't get better, but I think abandon the notion is that you can change them and make them better. The relationship will make you better because there's a lot of synergy there, but you've got to dissuade yourself of the false notion, I can make them better, or they will change this and then it will be okay.
That's great advice.
So what about looking at when I think, Kim, they went back to go forward, we like to do that and say, what did love look like growing up? What was something that you pulled out of that?
Yeah, I think that the thing that really stood out to me the most was with Trey. He came from a blended family. And not only was it a blended family, but it was a really large blended family.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Trey's mom, or father, I'm sorry, passed on really early. I don't even think he was old enough to actually know him. And then his mom remarried, and she remarried someone who had also lost a spouse. And so they came together with 7 children. And the thing that stood out to me the most was that they were able to blend a family of 7 children, and they each did it in a manner of taking on those other children as if they were their own. So what I mean by that is they didn't treat them any differently than they treated their own children. And they also established right away that no matter what, nothing could pierce the marriage bubble. They wouldn't be able to pin each other, the kids against them. They wouldn't be able to manipulate them or play this is my biological child card. And I think that that is one of the things that really stood out, that they were able to really hold their ground and bring 7 kids together. And I'm not saying it was easy, and I'm not saying that it didn't take a while, but it really stood out to Trey that they modeled that behavior, and they were able to even use that later in their own relationship.
And I think that's applicable to anybody that has a blended family. It's, you think when you get together, maybe you think it's going to be easy or normal. And, I think Trey's advice to a blended family is that it takes a lot of time. And the difficulty of pulling a blended family together is not a comment on the husband, wife, or the primary relationship. If there's difficulty, it doesn't mean you made the wrong decision in the relationship. It means you need space and time to develop that connectedness, and what the husband and wife model eventually over time will prevail, and to be patient. I mean, he says their family rocked it. And what that really is unconditional love. It's the unconditional love of the husband and wife, and them looking at all the kids as all their children and removing the labels. And I think that, we all tend to put labels on our children, even on our significant others, as they always, or they are this. And you have to be really careful about putting those labels on, because then you pigeonhole them and you're saying they are this, and they can't, and they have to do so much to overcome that in your thought, and it definitely has an impact on how you relate to them. So those labels can be dangerous, and it's more about the unconditional love, and I think that's great advice to blended families on that.
I agree. Let's talk about commitment for a little bit, and maybe Leah's idea of commitment. And, sort of what she saw in their relationship. And that is that they were, if they had a struggle, if they had any kind of issues at all, they didn't brush it under the rug. And that was her quote. They always dealt with it straight on and didn't let things fester. And I think that we've learned over time that really the masters do this very well. As things arise, they nip it in the bud, they bring it up, they have a discussion about it, and move on.
I think that's great, Kim. And another thing I loved is you have to recommit every single day. So think about that and let that kind of sink in for a minute. You're thinking about your relationship, about your partner, your spouse, your husband, your wife. Are you recommitting every single day to them in some demonstrative way, in your thought, in your actions, in what you say and what you do? And she said, every day when my feet hit the floor, Lee says, I'm going to love my spouse today. Or how can I love my spouse today? How can I show up for my spouse today? It's not like, I did it once last week, or I said something a few days ago, or we did something special a couple months ago, right? It's those daily habitual things that you have to show up. And, she also, Trey talked about love is an action. Love is not a feeling. We have feelings that come from love, but those feelings come and go. But even though he may not be feeling love for her, he demonstrates it because of his commitment. Sure. And, he made a commitment with God and said, I'm going to be committed to you. I'm going to be committed to my spouse. And so even we all have times we may not feel that love. We might be angry or upset or be ruminating about something. But regardless of those feelings, we can hearken back to the commitment that we made to them and made to our Creator, if you did that in your religious service, and that commitment, and demonstrate that it's more than a feeling. And I think that's, we all like good feelings, but commitment is much deeper than that. And I think they understood that and were really working hard to demonstrate it in their relationship.
Sure.
When it comes to creating a kick-ass marriage, do you ever wonder what you could be doing better? Have you ever thought how helpful it would be to be a part of a like-minded community of other imperfect couples who want to level up in their number one relationship? Come visit Kickass Couples Nation, where you can talk with people just like you who are looking for ways to invest in and increase their joy, commitment, and fulfillment in their most important human relationship. You'll have access to a team of licensed marriage therapists, coaches, articles, podcasts, live webinars, and more. Just visit MatthewPHoffman.com so you can learn more about a community that's ready to help you level up. That's MatthewPHoffman.com so you can become of the growing Kickass Couples Nation right now.
What about the communication side of the relationship? Was there anything there that stood out to you?
You know, they have, it seems like everybody, all the couples we've talked to have some kind of ritual or some kind of time. And I think that we always talk about one of our rituals is rucking together in a weighted backpack. We have great talk time when we ruck, and it's a twofer because we're getting some exercise as well. But he said that they have coffee check-ins, and Lee talked about that, I think, and because she saw her parents doing it, and they still do it today. They have coffee in the afternoon, and they talk about their day. What are you experiencing? Where are you on this? It's those mental check-ins, right? And you have to have that emotional check-in. Do you know where your spouse's emotions are? What are they experiencing or what are they feeling? You can't guess or suppose. You have to ask and let them emote and have that connection time. And something, Kim, that you and I do is we talk about either high, low, victory. What's the high of your day? What was the low? What was the victory? Or another thing we use with our kids is the rose, the thorn, and the bud. What was beautiful about your day? What was thorny, maybe painful, didn't feel so good, or was frustrating? And then the bud is what hasn't blossomed yet and what are you looking forward to? Those simple questions and having those check-ins do so much, to anchor us to each other and to our family members.
I agree. And we do use that within our family, and it has proven to be a great tool for discussion and opening up and talking about emotions and how we feel. And it works the same exact way in a marriage. I also noted with communication that, they really had a little bit of a challenge in the beginning, and that was mostly with Trey. And you want to talk a little bit about that from the male perspective, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about it from the female perspective.
Yeah, I mean, he said, gosh, as a guy, not all guys think there needs to be a lot of communication, or they're fine with minimal communication, right? And they don't feel there needs to be a lot of stuff coming out all the time. And he said, as men, we're fine with less words and we're fine with not speaking a lot, but that's not necessarily the case for women. And he had to learn that, hey, if this is something she needs, I need to give it to her. And it doesn't matter what that is. If you don't know, one of my favorite questions is to Kim is, how can I best be supporting you right now? What's your biggest need? And it sounds so simple, but if you don't know, how could you possibly support them? And Trey learned that one of Lee's number one needs was great communication. And so he said, I got to up my game so I can give her what she needs.
Yeah, and I think from a female standpoint that in this case, especially, I think Trey thought, why does she keep asking me questions about my day? What happened today? How are you feeling about this?
Is she hounding me? Does she trust me?
Yeah, I think he had a lot of concern that she wasn't, believing where he was, or that he wasn't being truthful and honest with her. And I think that it took him a while to have that light bulb go on that for a woman, it's just a bid for connection. It's an opportunity to connect with your husband. And that's why we ask so many questions. We just want to have a good open line of communication because it makes us feel closer to you. And it makes us feel like we're being valued and we're heard.
Talk about that concept, Kim. We've talked about it before, but why are bids of connection so important for both men and women in the relationship?
I think when we're reaching out to our spouse to try to connect or have an emotional moment with them, when we don't respond, then we're really missing an opportunity to be close to that person. We may even be missing an opportunity that that person may end up being vulnerable with us. And so every time that door opens and we don't walk through it, then we're shutting that person down and we're shutting that person away. And that eventually will break down your marriage.
It will. It sends the message you don't care about or you won't prioritize me. And a recent example of this that I had in our relationship is Kim saying, I email you things and I ask you questions and I'm asking for your feedback. And she goes, it may be days or a week, or maybe I don't even hear back from you. She goes, that tells me that you're just not valuing me. And I had to say, gosh, I need to do a better job of making sure I'm responding. And because sometimes it's a need and sometimes it's a desire. And it doesn't matter if I think it is or isn't important, but I don't want her to ever feel he doesn't think I'm important. He is not willing to respond to me or to give me what I need. And then they start filling the blank with what that might mean. So it can be real subtle. And it's kind of a daily awareness to making sure that we are responding and accepting those bids, no matter what form. It could be a phone call, a text, an email, just a hand on a shoulder, right? And if you don't respond and turn away, they could feel shunned. So it can come in a lot of ways, and we have to kind of have our spidey senses on and be aware.
Let's move on to conflict, because I found that this couple had a little bit of a different way of doing things when conflict arises. And one of the things that I believe it was Lee said that if they get into conflict and it's maybe getting a little bit heated or maybe unresolvable in that moment, that a lot of times that they'll take time to write it down and they'll verbalize how they're feeling and they'll be really clear and concise about what's going on, and they'll give that to the other person to read. And that's not something that we have ever really practiced in our relationship, but I thought it was great advice, especially for people who really aren't sure what to say next, or if they really are heated and don't want to say something that they might regret, or they're trying to get a point across that just doesn't seem to be really coming across well to their partner.
Yeah, I think using the written word is great in communication, also for conflict resolution, because if you have to write down in a few sentences what it is that's bugging you, you can be pretty succinct. And it's a great way for them to read it without any harshness or intensity. And as long as you're being loving and thoughtful and your motive is good in the communication, it can be a great tool. And I think another thing, Kim, when we talk about conflict resolution, I think they have a game plan. They know we may take a time out. We may go to bed angry, right? We may, that old adage, never go to bed angry. That might work for some, but it may not work for others. You may need some cooling off time, some separation time. It doesn't mean icing your partner out. It's never acceptable to give the cold shoulder or withhold love, right? To have conditional love for your spouse. There's never a time where you say, well, I'm allowed to do that, because it's damaging no matter when you do it, whether it's in the middle of conflict or the middle of joy. So I would encourage you not to withhold the love or give the cold shoulder, or I'm not going to talk to them for days to show them how mad I am, or when I look at them, I'm going to scowl, right? When it's over, and you have to move on. But they've agreed on a game plan. And if you and your relationship don't have a game plan, when conflicts arise, how are we going to effectively handle them together? Let's agree on the terms. Let's agree on the rules. Let's agree on what we can do.
Such great advice.
What we cannot do. And it sounds so silly, but when you're feeling rosy and great and lovey-dovey, that's the best time to say, let's talk about our game plan for resolving conflict. Or really, it doesn't mean it's going to resolve and one opinion's going to weigh in, but you're seeking really understanding. Conflict is about, how can I gain understanding? Because if you understand, then you can get into agreement. You may disagree, you may agree, or you may say, we'll leave it at this and we'll move on. But having a game plan of how we're going to handle conflict is huge. And, Stephen Covey says, one of his greatest things is you're going to go for win-win. It's either win-win or no deal. If it's win-lose or lose-win, you can't accept it. And so if you have to say we're going to agree to disagree on this, move on. But you never want to have a resolution that's damaging to one and helpful to the other. It's got to be a win for us and a win for the relationship. And I thought that they did a great job. I think Trey said we're a team, and we've quit trying to go, I'm going to win, I want to win this, and I want to be right, because we realize that if one of us loses, we really both lose. And if you have that mentality as you approach conflict or misunderstandings, then you're going to come out on top.
Agreed. And I would like to move on to one of my favorite subjects, and that is intimacy.
That's your favorite subject?
I know, right?
It's one of my favorite too.
Well, really, we're talking about an additional pillar. And within that, our guests really both, I think, focused on the pillar of intimacy. And they believe that intimacy is, outside of our 3 C's, probably one of their most important and one that they have discovered and learned the most about pillar. And I believe that intimacy plays such a huge role in our relationship, as there's so many different kinds of intimacy. But specifically, this couple opened up the door to speaking about sexual intimacy and how important it was that they learned the necessity of having a great, healthy sexual relationship later on. Not early on in the relationship, but later on. And I think I want to point out that it's really easy for couples who are married and have been in the marriage game for a number of years to be very careful about the decline in a sexual, intimate relationship. Because I think after a little while, it can kind of feel like you're just roommates. And you're just mom and dad, and you're playing the role of the daily ins and outs of life, and you're not making your sexual intimacy a priority in the relationship. And it can be very damaging to the relationship.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it may change over time a little bit based on life stages, but I think that Trey said sexual intimacy is one of the biggest perks of your relationship. It's not just that fun thing you do on occasion, but sexual intimacy reconnects you. It makes you remind why you love somebody. It's the hormones that are released in the male and the female lobes when you have sexual intimacy, and that orgasm and the climax and all those good things happen. It makes you feel physiologically great and euphoric. And, you got to agree on the frequency and what works for both of you. But it's important that both partners' needs are being met inside of that sexual intimacy, and that you focus on it and make sure you're taking advantage of that huge perk, because that intimacy is the glue that holds the relationship together. And it's fun, and you should take delight in it and make sure both your needs are getting met.
Yeah, the connection and the emotional bond that happens with sexual intimacy is huge. And as you said, it is really important within the relationship that we spend time really enhancing that relationship and really understanding that relationship, her needs, his needs, and really taking delight in that relationship.
And they do. And I think that they said it's easy to fall into habit or routine and not to make it something that is key and vital. And you got to work on it and in it. I mean, it's not...
You got to spice it up.
You got to spice it up. You got to mix it up. It can't be the same place, the same day, the same time. I've been accused, and so we're always looking for fun ways to enjoy the sexual intimacy we have with each other. And it's between us, and we can tease about it, and we can flirt about it, and we have a lot of fun with it. And we want to just recognize that Trey and Lee are approaching it in a healthy way. And they... there's a lot of different kinds of intimacy, but they said, man, this is one of the most important because it helps that bond and keep them strong together.
And I love that you said there's a lot of different kinds of intimacy. There are, and they're all really equally important. this particular episode just really pointed out, and they were very open and vulnerable with us about the sexual intimacy part of it, which we haven't really had a lot of our interviews kind of go down that route. So I appreciated them for that.
Yeah, and these are coming from people who counsel other couples.
That's exactly right.
And other marriages.
They're professionals.
In a faithful, Christian-based way. And they say, you got to have the sexual part right. And they're right. And so we appreciate that. And there's so many other good things, Kim, out of this interview.
Yeah, I hate to give away too much more because it was a really great interview, and I want to encourage all of our listeners to go and pull this up wherever you listen to your podcasts and listen to it in its entirety.
It was definitely worthwhile. And if this episode or other episodes raise questions in your mind, or you say, man, I wish I could do that better, or I could really use help in that area, please come check out Kickass Couples Nation. If you go to MatthewPHoffman.com, we have a whole community with a team of elite licensed marriage therapists. We do webinars. Kim and I do private content. We have a fantastic Facebook group. We would love to help you on your journey and learn what we can do to help you make it better.
Yeah, you want to talk about enrichment, you can get it right here.
So thanks for joining us today. And we just want you to remember one thing.
Happily ever after doesn't just happen. It's on purpose.
That's all we've got for this episode of the Kick-Ass Couples Podcast. If you like the content of this show, you'll love Matthew's newly released book, Kick-Ass Husband, Winning at Life, Marriage, and Sex. To receive a digital mini book of quotes and images from the book, all you have to do is rate this show and leave a review in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in to listen. Then email us a screenshot of your review at podcast@kickasscouplespodcast.com, and we'll get it over to you right away. Until next time, remember, happily ever after doesn't just happen, it's on purpose.